Okay, looks like we're recording now. Okay, great. So this workshop is going to be a series of blend of questions for reflection, which we do not answer aloud, and also questions for discussion, and also reading excerpts of King, Warrior, Magician, Lover, and the 4 sequel books, and some teaching. And just so you know, the in-person or iGroup format of this study also includes time for journaling and breaking up into pairs and groups. So you're not going to get that, but you know, I encourage you to journal on your own, and if you want, check in with other people throughout the week until the next session. That way you can get the benefit that you would normally have in the iGroup format. As I said, the initial 4 iterations of this series will be recorded with 2 purposes in mind. First, to make the study available to other men who wish to approach and process this text. It does presume a certain level of understanding of Carl Jung and other works in the field of depth psychology, as well as mythology and religions, thanks to Douglas Gillette. But second, this is being recorded to document the usefulness of my doctoral project and dissertation for the use in men's groups as I focus on gender, sexuality, and religion. So everyone wave hi to my dissertation committee. All right. Finally, I have a poll that I'm going to launch right now, and I'm going to do a more formal check-in in just a few moments. But since we don't have too many people, I think we'll all be able to check in and we'll all be able to participate. So that's good. I was secretly hoping for not a lot of people. So there's the poll. And, you know, please do pay attention to people's check-ins. But please do answer those questions also. So I'm going to light some incense to create some holy space here. Let's see. Ooh.
How long is today's workshop?
90 minutes.
Okay, thank you.
Sure. Okay. And I have it basically timed down to the minute. So I will be cutting stuff off if I need to. So here's the incense. I was really impressed with some of the online resources on MKP Connect. And I am including this excerpt from Jerry Bose's Calling in the Archetypal Energies. I don't know if you know him, but I don't, but I was really impressed with this. So let's center ourselves. Call forth your king. Your king brings compassion, blessing, and generosity. Most importantly, it is the vision of your king that provides inspiration, direction, and hope for your kingdom. Without the vision of the king, there is chaos. Your warrior knows not whom to protect and what noble goal to serve. Your lover remains isolated and in fear. Your magician is abandoned in the chaos. It is your king's vision that gives hope in times of despair and clarity in times of confusion. Welcome your king as your ally tonight. Aho.
Aho.
And our reflection question is as follows. And I choose not to use sensei question because I feel that culturally offensive in some ways, perhaps cultural appropriation. So I'm choosing not to use that, but do as you wish in your own circles. The question is, who in your life radiates king energy? And what is your relationship to him or her? Let me ask that again. Who in your life radiates king energy? And what is your relationship to him or her? Okay. So I invite us to check in with name, if you have an animal name, that to your primary feeling, and no more than a sentence to identify the aspects of yourself in which king energy, as you understand it, radiates. And I can repeat that as we go along if you need. I'm just going to call on you as I see your name in order. Stavros, would you begin?
Okay. Stavros Panopoulos, Noble Radiant Owl, New York City. I was initiated 2015, Camp Success. And King energy radiates from me, and mostly in my workplace, where I'm in a leadership role. And so that's where it's most evident. And I would like to develop it in other areas as well, specifically relationship and romance.
Oh. Michael Kensing.
Morning or good afternoon. Mike Kensing, my name is Fierce Kind Deer. I was initiated last October 2017 Lake Surprise Camp. This is all new to me. I have examples of, in one of the I groups I'm in, gentleman, Scott actually, who exemplifies a balance of the lover, the warrior, especially the two, and they're both strong and has like a real balance. And he's able to kind of like look at the 5,000-foot picture of the whole of what's happening. And so it's an example for me. I have a strong lover energy, but I don't have a strong warrior about action. So I'm looking forward to what's going to be shared today. With that, I'm in.
Oh, yeah. And gentlemen, let's please keep our comments brief. Probably one sentence about the check-in question. No shame, though. Bill Cheney, would you check in?
Yeah, Bill Cheney, Golden Eagle. Did my warrior training in May of 2013. And I would say that the closest king examples I have are I group leaders that I'm working with. And with that, I'm in.
Oh. Dave Messman, are you in a place where you can participate?
Yes, I can participate.
All right, great.
Dave Bestman, Unapologetic Gorilla. I did my initiation in November 2017. And the King energy, to follow up on the last person who spoke, I think the I group leaders exemplified the King energy. The way they control things in a masculine way would be the King energy I aspire to.
Okay.
With that, I'm in.
Oh. David Bird.
David Bird Bear, initiated 1992. King for me is a man called Don Jones. He was very kingly retired minister and chairman of MKP at one time. And no one else has ever come close to how far I've put him up on a pedestal. So he is the king. He passed away about 4 years ago. I'm in.
Oh. Jacob. Jacob, you're on mute. Do you want me to unmute you?
Yes. Can you hear me
Oh,
now?
you got it. Okay.
All right, yeah. So my name is Jacob. I was initiated in March of 2015 or February in Deer Park, Pennsylvania. My animal name is Wild, Powerful, Dancing Eagle. My I group leader, that's literally the first person who came to mind when you asked who exemplified King energy. And I'm in with that.
Cool. Thank you. Bo Riley. Bo. Looks like you don't have me. It looks like Bo doesn't have audio capabilities. Okay. Scott Ryder.
Scott Ryder, Emperor Penguin, initiated February 2010. And where King energy is showing up in my life is in my family and in my relationship with my boss at work. And I'm in with joy.
Thank you. 269-760-6460. Okay. 917-270-8473. Okay. Well, we'll move on, and maybe you'll have an opportunity to check out fellows who weren't able to get off mute or weren't in a position to speak publicly. Maybe you're on the bus or whatever. I want to start with an excerpt that I feel exemplifies what an archetype is. So, like, what is an archetype? It's such a weird word, and we're not used to hearing it necessarily unless you're in MKP circles. And if we are in MKP circles, we may be afraid to ask because everyone knows, presumably, what an archetype is, but some people don't. So here's what I want to begin with, pages 9 through 10. Oh, sorry, let me check the poll. It looks like, okay, let's end the poll, share the results. Most people have not read it. Okay, cool. Most people do not have a copy of it. And King Within, you know, most people have not read it, and most people have not, do not have a copy of it. All right, good to know. That helps me kind of place where everyone is. So you're going to get some exposure to it over the next 4 weeks if you choose to attend all 4 weeks. But let's begin with this excerpt from pages 9 through 10. Most of us are familiar with the fact that baby ducks, soon after they are hatched, attach themselves to whomever or whatever is walking by at the time. The phenomenon is called imprinting. It means that the newly hatched duckling is wired from mother or caretaker. It doesn't have to learn from the outside, as it were, what a caretaker is. The archetype for caretaker comes online shortly after the duckling comes into the world. Unfortunately, however, the mother that the duckling meets in those first moments may not be adequate to the task of taking care of it. Nonetheless, although those in the outer world may not live up to the instinctual expectation, they may not even be ducks, the archetype for caretaker forms the duckling's behavior. So my question for you is, I'll begin with an I statement. Sometimes I am a duckling. I attach myself to and chase after whatever is expedient or momentarily gratifying to me. Or I try to find something, anything that grounds me, whether good or bad. So what, if anything, do you chase after? And is it adequate to the task of taking care of you? What, if anything, do you chase after? And is it adequate to the task of taking care of you? I'll give you a few moments to think about that. And if you feel called to answer that, I'll call on a couple people. Just raise your hand in the raise your hand feature, and I'll call on you. So seeing none, would anyone actually just speak up and we'll hear you. What do you attach yourself to, and is it adequate to taking care of you?
I can share.
Great, thank you, Mike.
I don't know how to raise my hand in this Zoom thing, so
Got it.
I immediately thought of I have used something that's a kind of a way to soothe myself. But I use sex and connecting with men on a sexual level as a way to try to restore something in myself. And so I can really go to that a lot as a way to try to bring about homeostasis. It doesn't really do that. So that's what I want to share.
Yeah, certainly sex or controlled substances or certain behaviors like gambling or like anything to excess may soothe, may comfort momentarily, be gratifying, but may not be adequate to, that duckling within. Anyone else, briefly?
Could you repeat the question, please?
Sure. The question is, what, if anything, do you chase after? And is it adequate to the task of taking care of you? So some examples: sex, religion, even yoga, exercise, career, success, wealth, significant other, family, etc. 973, were you saying something? Okay.
Well, can you see me? Stop.
No, I can. There, I can hear you.
Okay, great. Well, what I attach myself to is attention, being the center of everything, in one form or another, whether visually or by just holding everyone's attention with what I've got to say. It does not satisfy me, but although I feel the impulse to do it. I'll often say I have nothing to say, but I do like to talk. And so just, being the center of attention, and I'll do it in very subconscious ways.
Yeah. Oh, thank you both for your honesty and digging deep. What I want to say is that we can be so out of touch with our primordial energies. We can be, because like the duckling is just going with what they're hardwired to do. And we, as human beings, can focus on the king archetype and the warrior archetype and magician and lover within each of us. But we're so out of touch with that, we let other things distract us from that. So the duckling is able to tap into something ancient, something unlearned, something primordial. In the same way, we have to have the same kind of imprinting going on. But our culture deadens us to whatever it is that we could attach to in a healthy way, the archetypes of king, warrior, magician, lover. And in so doing, if we are able to tap back into that, I would add we would be more integrated selves. And I think Robert Bly would agree with that. Robert Bly from the Iron John story. All right, moving on. We're doing well on time, so that's good. I'm doing a lot of talking right now, I feel, so I'm going to change that in just a little bit. I just want to give everyone a good introduction to it, and I've identified two passages that I feel operate as a thesis for the book. One is a problem to be solved, and second is the solution that Moore and Gillette have placed before themselves. So actually, let me share my screen, and if someone else would read, that would be greatly appreciated. This blue text right here, do you see that? Where it says intention of these workshops, would someone read that?
Okay. Okay, we hear it of some men that, quote, he just can't get himself together, unquote. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay. What this means on a deep level is that so-and-so is not experiencing and cannot experience his deep cohesive structures. He is fragmented. Various parts of his personality are split off from each other and leading fairly independent and often chaotic lives. A man who cannot get it together, end of quote, is a man who has probably not had the opportunity to undergo ritual initiation into deep structures of manhood. He remains a boy, not because he wants to, but because no one has shown him the way to transform his boy energies into man energies. No one has led him into direct and healing experiences of inner world of masculine potentials. And we want to show men how they can access their positive archetypal potentials for their own benefit and for the benefit of all those around them, maybe even for the planet.
Yeah. So what's interesting to me is that, you know, Moore and Gillette seem kind of, I mean, this was written in like, what, 1990. And, you know, MKP is just starting out. These are uninitiated men writing. They're prophets of a need for a new mature masculine to come online and to not save the world, you know, like at the beginning with context we hear, you know, if we're naive, if we're to believe that one charismatic leader, blah, 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 would save the world. But, you know, they're identifying the need to return back to those archetypes, that primordial energy that I was mentioning before. Yeah. So, does anyone else have a book, or who has a book in front of them? Okay, let's call on someone else. Okay, would somebody be willing to read the next passage? And let me tell you what that is. It's the beginning of chapter 3, pages 13 to 14.
I wanted to share something.
Oh, sure, thanks.
The need to feel important was what came up for me when you asked, what do you attach yourself to? So that could be like sounding smart in a conversation or feeling accomplished.
Yeah. And, you know, it's a fine balance because, you know, what I'm finding is that if we try to dampen that or deaden our instincts, you know, I mean, sometimes we can go overboard and we want to sound smart and whatever, and then we can go to the opposite extreme and become an abdicating king or a weakling, as we're about to read later, you know, and that can be confused for like lover energy. And in the same way, tyrant king energy, which we'll talk about later, can be confused with warrior energy, you know. So we have to be really careful in, are we in shadow or are we in our gold, you know? So are we trying to be an abdicating king and just allow everyone to talk over us? Or are we living in our full potential and really contributing when we have something of value to contribute? So I encourage you, Jacob, you know, when you feel the urge to say, well, you know, maybe I need to step back, to think, you know, am I being in shadow right now? Or am I being in my gold? Thank you for mentioning that. Yeah. So who was mentioning they would like to read chapter 3, the very beginning, to pages 13 to 14? Mike Kensing? Oh, Bill Cheney, would you?
Cheney.
Sure. Where do you want me to start?
Right at the beginning of Boy Psychology, chapter 3, page
Okay.
13, and then end at right before the structure of the archetypes.
Okay.
I think we all have the same edition.
Okay. The drug dealer, the duckling and diving political leader, the wife beater, the chronically crabby boss, the hotshot junior executive, the unfaithful husband, the company yes man, the indifferent graduate school advisor, the holier than thou minister, the gang member, the father who can never find the time to attend his daughter's school programs, the coach who ridicules his star athletes, the therapist who unconsciously attacks his clients' shining and seeks a kind of gray normalcy for them, the yuppie. All these men have something in common. They are all boys, pretending to be men. They got that way, honestly, because nobody showed them what a mature man is like. Their kind of manhood is a pretense to manhood that goes largely undetected as such by most of us. We are continually mistaking this man's controlling, threatening, and hostile behaviors for strength. In reality, he's showing an underlying extreme vulnerability and weakness, the vulnerability of the wounded boy. The devastating fact is that most men are fixated at an immature level of development. These early developmental levels are governed by the inner blueprints appropriate to boyhood. And when they are allowed to rule what should be adulthood, when the archetypes of boyhood are not built upon and transcended by the ego's appropriate accessing of the archetypes of mature masculinity, they cause us to act out of our hidden, to us but seldom to others, boyishness. We often talk with affection about boyishness in our culture. The truth is that the boy in each of us, when he is in his appropriate place in our lives, is the source of playfulness, of pleasure, of fun, of energy, of a kind of open-mindedness that is ready for adventure and for the future. But there is another kind of boyishness that remains infantile in our interactions within ourselves and with others when manhood is required.
Yeah. So just going back to that first paragraph, their kind of manhood is a pretense to manhood that goes largely undetected as such by most of us. So what are some examples of pretense to manhood in the real world? And I just, it's a very political climate right now, and I just challenge us to go to talk about characteristics and not necessarily demonize individuals that, frankly, I might love to demonize myself. But let's talk about characteristics. What are some examples of pretense to manhood that go largely undetected by most of us?
Stavros here. Can
Yeah.
you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. Some of the pretenses, I think, are bossiness, aggressive direction, and domination.
Okay.
What does the word pretense mean?
Pretend. Something that pretends to be something else. Like, oh, like she's so pretentious. She, always gets a latte from Starbucks or something like that, like she's pretending to be whatever. Or, he thinks he's a man, but he's only a boy, like that song,
Okay.
A front.
I don't see how to raise my hand.
Oh,
So
okay.
if you can, I'll try to learn. But where I go to is what the founder wrote in the current context about the military. And I deeply respect military and what they do. But I believe that when we converted to industrial high explosive warfare, 120 years ago, we needed men who would irrationally walk into machine gun fire. And so we applied a pretense of manhood to if you join the army and all of the hierarchy that went along with it, and the posturing, and there's beneath that real kingship, personal ownership, decision making.
Okay. All right. So David Bird is seeing some complexity behind something that we normally applaud. So that's great. One more example, anyone? If you feel your stomach burning, that means you need to say something. Okay. Well, I'm surprised no one brought, well, maybe someone did bring up something that the bossiness, those characteristics, so that was good. Yeah. So this part may surprise you. Throughout their book, Moore and Gillette reference the baby Jesus as well as Dionysus and other manifestations of the primordial God child. At the divine birth, narratives come the sacrificial death, and in some circumstances, resurrection. Then, in chapter 3, Boy Psychology, Moore and Gillette write the following, and I'm going to read now. The death of the hero is the death of boyhood, of boy psychology, and it is the birth of manhood and man psychology. The death of the hero in the life of a boy or a man really means that he has finally encountered his limitations. He has met the enemy, and the enemy is himself. He has met his own dark side, his very unheroic side. He has fought the dragon and been burned by it. He has fought the revolution and drunk the dregs of his own humanity. He's overcome the mother and then realized his incapacity to love the princess. The death of the hero signals a boy's or man's encounter with true humility. It is the end of the heroic consciousness. True humility, we believe, consists of two things. First is knowing our limitations, and the second is getting the help we want. And as I was reading that, just now, something hit me that it's not, so boy psychology is being the hero, being the hero of the story, of the Marvel comic book, of the whatever. But as I'm reading this right now, what I'm reading is that humility is man energy, and asking for help is man energy. So here's the question of this section. And this is not in the book, but when I was taking classes with Robert Moore in seminary, in his lectures, he would find occasion to say, "You gotta go through the tomb to get to the womb." So think about a time in your life when you were confronted by your own enemy, yourself. Or think about a time when you faced your own limitations. How were you, or how are you, different after facing this reality? And remember, when we talk about the tomb, we're talking about that Jesus Dionysus type paradigm of dying to the world, to the self, to whatever, and then raising up again, going through the womb again, the process of being reborn. So how are you, or are you different after facing this reality? Anyone may begin.
I could speak to that. What you just spoke about is very salient to me, because for many, many years, my life was ruled by illusion, and I went through a serious illness where I was deeply, and I couldn't function. It's lasted well over a year. So all my sense of my identity based on my accomplishment and profession were taken away. And so were not taken away, but they were not at hand to me. So so this was a form of illusion, and in this time, I was able to look with some help and some reading to see that my personality was really a series of self-defense mechanisms all tied up together to deal with whatever I might encounter with. They were scripted behavior patterns. So, and so the result of that was that I decided to live my life differently. one of the things I did was I legally changed my name. I no longer went by the name that I was given. And I'm in continuing process now to see myself as that duckling that hatched, and whoever came by was the figure that fulfilled my needs. If I could just take a minute to talk about it, at the time when I went through this health crisis, it occurred to me that basically I looked at where I am and everything that got me to this point, and if another couple had taken me home from the hospital instead of my parents, I would have been somebody else, different name, different background, and then yet another couple took me. So what is that essential self that is indestructible, that exists no matter what couple took me home, what name I was given? And I've learned my priority is to stay in touch with that.
Yeah.
And see that, and work at every detail from that. And then forgive myself when my personality gets offended or stumped, just to see that, that it is just that it is the concept of who I am.
Yeah. And
so that was a form of death and resurrection for me. And the Jesus, concurrently, MKP is very much in alignment with A Course in Miracles, which is a foundational guidepost from a guiding light for me. And that's what it talks about, precisely to realize, that our ego, our illusion of ourselves, our concept, was handed to us, and we have the power. And using the lenses of archetypes to see what we've acquired in patterns from our duckling experience of hatching by whoever was nearby us.
Right.
So in any case, I hope I kept that connected.
Yeah, that's awesome. I mean, the process of finding your essential self and stripping away everything else, and then claiming a new name at the end, like we claim an affirmation at the end of Guts, or we change our animal name at the end of Guts if we feel so moved. That's another death, resurrection. And it sounds like you went through that in a very real way in your life. So that's really awesome.
Yeah, if I could just add,
sure.
Our culture, particularly our Christian culture, really focuses. I mean, Easter's coming up now too, so it's a really important time. I mean, our culture is so wrapped up in death and wrapped up in the crucifixion as being the thing to focus on, and it's the resurrection that is really the focus of Easter. So in any case, but that's the resurrection is the operative word here, not death.
Sure. Okay. Absolutely. For if you can get there, some people never get there. Some people never even enter the tomb. So I agree. That's what was the most generative in your life. And
it's not a plateau to reach. It's it's not a plateau to reach. Like, you don't get there. Mm-hmm. There's no there. In the sense of like a final understanding, like everything's all clear now. I mean,
right. It's the beginning of a process.
Right. Yeah.
Birth is the beginning of a process. Is the beginning of a new life. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a good clarification. Mm-hmm. Yeah. The danger with this particular part of the workshop is that some people may develop the impression that boy psychology is the enemy of man psychology, and I want to put that to rest. In point of fact, according to Moore and Gillette, developing a mature boy psychology is a prerequisite for advancing into man psychology. And if I could have someone read chapter 4 at the beginning, the first paragraph of chapter 4, would anyone be willing to do that? Someone who hasn't spoken much yet. Mike Kensing, would you do that?
What page? What page?
Page 43. Just the first paragraph there. And I'll share my screen so you can see something that was introduced a little earlier than that.
It is enormously difficult for a human being to develop to full potential. The struggle with the infantile within us exerts a tremendous gravitational pull against achieving that full adult potential. Nevertheless, we need to fight gravity by dint of hard labor and to build the pyramids of first boyhood and then manhood that constitute the core structures of our masculine selves. The ancient Maya seldom destroyed earlier structures from their cities past. Like them, we do not want to demolish the pyramids of boyhood, for they were and will always remain generators of power and gateways to energy resources from our primordial past. But we need to get to work laying courses of stone over those old terraces and stairs. We need to build brick by brick toward the goal of mature masculinity, till at last we can stand on the high platform at the top, surveying our realm as Lord of the Four Quarters.
Yeah. So I'm sharing my screen with you. Thank you, Mike. Here's the something introduced on page 20 as the shadow archetypes were being introduced, and or as boy psychology and man psychology was being discussed. And as you can see, boyhood is underneath manhood. Manhood is built on top. And here's a picture of a Mayan kind of pyramid. So we can visually see what he's referring to. So let me switch back here.
Daniel, can I share one thing?
Yeah, go ahead.
It was in relation to what you brought up about an experience that was kind of like going from the into the tomb and resurrection kind of thing.
Okay.
When I was on my men's weekend last October, it was a very challenging, tumultuous, painful for a lot of that weekend. And I hit a point where someone had shared with me, well, you know, all of you is welcome. So your anger, your grief, your whatever. And I had a lot of rage and anger, which normally I'd never give myself permission to feel. And when I allowed myself and honored the fact that I had this rage and anger, it was like this tremendous shift happened in me. I gave myself permission to have feelings that I really had not allowed myself real in my life before. And that was the huge awakening for me on my weekend, that I could honor all of me. And it shifted my whole energy from being angry and frustrated and really hating being there. Like, because I couldn't honor the fact that I had some major feelings about the process. Once I was able to honor it, all of a sudden I arrived and I had more peace and I felt more connected and more like I want this and I want to be part of it, when I honored my true self. So anyway, that was pretty powerful. Thank you.
I mean, I guess some people think we're trying to get to a happy, clappy kind of place, where what we're really trying to do is identify what's going on underneath and recognize it. I'll share this briefly. When I was in training to be a chaplain, 1,600 hours of internship, unpaid, thank you. I struggled a lot with judgment of people. I think if we dig deep, we can all say we struggle with certain things. And for me, it was judgment of certain people. Like, I would make presuppositions about people if they had like facial tattoos, or if they were a female wearing a jean skirt, I would say, oh, well, they must be Pentecostal, or a bun in their hair, or no piercings, or whatever, and the point of this training was not to say, you can't be judgmental anymore. It was just to say, note that you're being judgmental, bracket it, and move on. You know, and so the point of this study and men's work in general is not to knock it all down and build something very nice and elegant back up, but it's to build on what we already have. We can't take away our past, our experiences, our traumas, as I was telling Scott earlier, our challenges, but and remember, in context, they say we initiate by offering each man healing, and we honor his work to become the man he wants to be. That's kind of one of the thrusts behind what a new warrior training adventure is trying to do. We initiate by offering each man healing. Yeah. Last reading for now, page 45. Beginning with, there's a saying in psychology. One more participant to read that. Page 45.
I can read it.
Would you do that? Thanks.
There is a saying in psychology that we have to take responsibility for what we're not responsible for. This means that we are not responsible, as no infant is, for what happened to us, for what happened to us to stunt us and to fixate us in our earlier years when our personalities were formed, when we got stuck at immature levels of masculinity. Yet it does us no good to join the chorus of the delinquents in West Side Story as they plead their case against society and leave things at that.
Could you keep reading to the end?
Ours is a psychological age rather than an institutional one. What used to be done for us by institutional structures and through ritual process, we now have to do inside ourselves, for ourselves. Ours is a culture of the individual rather than the collective. Our Western civilization pushes us to strike out on our own, to become, as Jung said, individuated from each other. That which used to be more or less unconsciously shared by everyone, like the process of developing a mature masculine identity, we must now connect with consciously and individually. It is to this task that we now turn.
Yeah. Very good, thank you. Now is a time to, does anyone get that? Anyone have comments or thoughts about what Scott just read?
I have a comment.
Sure.
I loved what he said earlier, that we take responsibility for what we're not responsible for.
Mm-hmm.
And that means we're not responsible, as no infant is, for what happened to us to stunt or fixate us in our early years when our personalities were formed. In a word that comes up for me, the word is forgiveness.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we use the word acceptance a lot, but the word forgiveness has more weight. To forgive myself, to forgive others. And just that, I think for me, it crystallizes not taking responsibility for things we're not, or not being responsible for things we're not being responsible. You know what I say?
Yeah. It's a hard task, especially when we're talking about a loved one being murdered or whatever, or when we're talking about a violation of physical or sexual nature, or whatever. Forgiveness can be hard, and sometimes divorce, being taken advantage of by our boss or anyone. There are a lot of scenarios that, we don't want to forgive. We don't want to forgive, and what do we do with that? What do we do with that?
Oh, what we do with that is recognize, where this is in alignment, we're holding on to the boy psychology. Because as we were all children, and to identify with the child, identify with the wound, identify with is to not forgive, to not forgiving is to not free yourself. So it is difficult indeed. Did I address what you asked?
Well, I was asking rhetorically, but I think your response is good. You know, it shows that it's a very complex issue.
Oh, yeah.
You know, I mean, what do we do when we say, okay, like I am a survivor of rape? What do I do with that? You know, or if I say my mother was killed by someone who was probably drunk driving, what do we do with that? You know, and so it's hard, and there's no pat answer really. And that's what makes this stuff messy, this maturity stuff messy. You know, we have to deal with our past. We have to recognize it as reality, or we become dissociated and schizoid, you know, or we can live in the reality of what has happened with us, to us, for us, and move forward and try to find that silver lining. Try to be productive as a result of it. It's a difficult task, and again, there's no one way to do it.
Daniel,
Yeah,
can I share something?
sure. Is that Michael?
Yeah.
Yeah.
This last sentence brought up the fact, the more I'm examining my life and doing this work, the more I realize how much there's an immature little boy that is running the show in me. I mean, I see it so more and more so clearly. And there's a part of me realizes there's parts of me that do not want to grow up. I see it. I know I have this resistance. But when we say we must connect with consciously and individually, it's really becoming, by looking at this and honoring the reality of where I am, and then making a choice to work towards change. So it's being conscious of the fact. It's so funny that when I got into this stuff and went on my weekend and then started doing work, all of a sudden parts of me are shutting down and resisting change, even creating a mission. It's because the little boy in me is terrified of what it means to go and become a man at fear of losing. So with this resistance in me the good part is that I have the awareness of it, but I never realized how much I really want to stay a boy. This work is bringing it all up, but it's good that I see it. It's conscious. It's now, what do I choose to do about it? That's the thing.
Right. The blue pill or the red pill in the Matrix, you know? What do you do? Yep.
Can I make a comment?
Oh, please do.
Yeah, so I feel like the missing bridge here between like taking responsibility for things that we didn't do, perhaps, is that every single person is interpreting what happens to them differently. Like, let's say you have two siblings who their mom was murdered when they were a little kid. One kid, for some reason, we don't really know why, was actually fine with it. It didn't affect them as much as the other kid who was torn by it, and the rest of their life continued to grieve over it and feel like it was a big loss in their life. So you're not taking responsibility for you're taking responsibility for your personal relationship to the event. So if somebody says, like, my mom used to beat me when I was a little kid, how can I take responsibility for that? Well, maybe your mom also beat your brother too, but for some reason, based on his birth, his psychology, his life experience, he didn't internalize it the same way. So you're actually just taking responsibility for, all right, the way I internalized it hindered my life. I take responsibility for the actions I chose to take based off of the way I processed it. So it's like one level deeper. I'm not taking responsibility for that guy hitting me with a brick, but I am taking responsibility for the way that I chose to move forward in my life, either positively or negatively.
Mhm.
And when we talk about victimhood and how in our society it's sort of like idolized in a way, like who's the biggest victim? They get the most, like, we could talk about that another time. But it's like, if somebody's choosing to be a victim, in my opinion, it's not an empowering way to live. It's not allowing. It's the boy. The boy is the victim who feels helpless, in my opinion, and the king is the one who's able to say, "Okay, my kingdom just got attacked, and I'm going to choose how I'm going to react to it and choose how I will move forward," rather than the boy who says, "Oh shit, my kingdom just got attacked," and doesn't really choose, sort of acts out of panic or fear. And we didn't really talk about love and fear here, but like,
Mhm.
I believe that that's the differentiating factor between the immature and the mature, or the shadow and the gold, is the whether you're choosing to act based off of the fear within you or the
Mhm.
higher, whatever that is called.
Got it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, what you're pointing to is exactly, I mean, something that Bob or Robert Moore would talk about quite a bit in class, is the difference between, I mean, as humans, we have this amazing thing called the cerebral cortex, right? But when something bad happens to us, we revert to our reptilian brain, right? And we just react, and boom, we're back in that. We're like the guy who comes to the NWTA who's resistant to everything, until they finally get in touch with the pain, and what Mike was talking about, the everything, and then oh, that's welcome here too. And then the cerebral cortex kicks in, and they're able to reflect and step back and say, oh, okay, got it. And another thing you were saying about identifying, I mean, that's not the word you used, identifying with the violence or the being hit by a brick, or like, we can choose to be, in healthcare, we have this thing called person-centered healthcare. So it's not a demented person, but it's a person with dementia, and it's not a uh, brick hitting victim, but it's someone who was hit by a brick. Like there's another story there, and they were hit by a brick. So there are various ways we can interpret, not to diminish the absurdity, or like, why would anyone do that to anyone, you know? But it happens. People get shot. People, you know, there's, I don't know. It's very messy. It's very complex.
Well, I think, can I say something to what both you and Jacob said?
Sure. And then we'll move on. Yeah.
Yeah, because Jacob was very salient. Thank you, Jacob.
Yeah. Thank you.
Because I think what Jacob's pointing to is not the fact or the actual event, but the interpretation that we have that is essential. Because things happen. How we facts don't offend us. Our interpretation offends us. And the question that's being raised, in this work is, what is the payoff of this interpretation? Why do we cling to it? What's being kept alive by clinging to an early interpretation that we had at an earlier time?
Yeah.
And, and then questioning that payoff. Why are we clinging to it? Because, the past can't be changed, but our understanding of it can. And that's, but what's stopping us?
Right.
Why are we clinging? We're the chooser, we're the decision maker. Thank you.
Yeah, could I add one quick thing?
Yeah, go ahead.
So the quick thing is that I believe that unless someone has an approach to life that is centered in my presence here in this world, is like, has some meaning, or I'm on some kind of journey, or I'm on a spiritual path, I believe it's almost impossible to do that, to do what I'm saying, because how would it make sense that my brother didn't get traumatized, but I did when I was a young boy? Unless that was my path, or unless that was my karma, or whatever word you want to use, unless that was my lesson to be learned there. And so I just felt like that was the last point I wanted to make.
Yeah. No, it's very good. It's very good. And we can respond in ways that serve us for some time or don't serve us, and we can get stuck. Some people get stuck and some people don't, about things like our mother being murdered or getting hit by a brick. So it's just recognizing, what no longer serves us, putting that to bed, and going through the tomb to get to the womb, as this section suggested.
So another way, Daniel, is to look at this like these events. We have these primordial urges, whether it be the trickster or the other,
It's okay, go ahead.
the weak, the coward, the high chair tyrants and things like that, that these events reinforce. Like if we choose, to attach ourselves to events to validate primordial forces. Is that am I being clear with that? My question?
Yes.
That they already have these proclivities
Uh-huh.
of energies, and that we'll take these events to reinforce them.
Yes. Yeah. And that's attached to the ego, I believe. Yeah. As they would say.
I mean, just keeping to
I want to move on here. Okay. I'll read very quickly chapter 5, the third, fourth, and fifth paragraphs, beginning on page 49 to 50, the end of page 49 to 50, and then think about what a king looks like. It could be a sovereign too. One example that comes to my mind is actually female, but here, historically, kings have always been sacred. As mortal men, however, they have been relatively unimportant. It is the kingship, or the king energy itself, that has been important. We all know the famous cry when a king dies and another is waiting to ascend the throne. The king is dead, long live the king. The mortal man who incarnates the king energy or bears it for a while in the service of his fellow human beings, in the service of the realm of whatever dimensions, in the service of the cosmos, is almost an interchangeable part, a human vehicle for bringing this ordering and generative archetype into the world and into the lives of human beings. So again, it's not a thing, it's an archetype. As Sir James Frazer and others have observed, kings in the ancient world were often ritually killed when their ability to live out the king archetype began to fail. What was important was the generative power of the energy not be tied to the fate of an aging and increasingly impotent mortal. With the raising up of a new king, the king energy was re-embodied, and the king as archetype was renewed in the lives of the people of the realm. In fact, the whole world was renewed. This pattern, the ritual killing and reviving, is what lies behind the Christian story of the death and resurrection of Christ, the Savior King. The danger for most men who become possessed by this energy is that they too will fully fulfill the ancient pattern and die prematurely. So my question is, and this should be pretty easy, who historically or right now has been an example of someone possessed by king energy, and as a result, he or she fulfilled the ancient pattern and died prematurely?
Like Nixon, I think.
Oh, Nixon?
Yeah, because he was like so caught up in his presidency that he ordered
Oh,
those people to do Watergate, and
yeah.
then he got impeached. So it's a similar idea because he was so captivated by the king
Okay.
idea
Yeah. Yeah. And in
in an
perhaps the
unhealthy way.
Tyrant King as well.
Yes, that's
Yeah.
what I
In the
mean.
Shadow King. Yeah.
I guess that's what I interpreted what you just said as, is like
Uh,
somebody so power hungry and megalomaniac, or like
Okay.
Napoleon or something, who like he was brought to an island after he. I don't actually
Yeah.
understand what
In
you're.
this sense, being possessed is less of a judgment and more of a description. And so, like, who came to mind for me that's female is Benazir Bhutto. You know, I think she just possessed um, king or sovereign energy, and she was assassinated as a result. Can you think of anyone that may have been assassinated or that was just very stately, very kingly, very sovereign, that perhaps their reign ended all too early?
We would say Martin Luther King.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Gandhi, Jesus,
yeah,
right?
Oh, Bob Marley
yeah,
or John Lennon.
sure. Malcolm X,
So I have a question.
Lincoln, John F. Kennedy.
Yeah.
Got
I have a question.
Yeah,
I'm having difficulty wrapping my mind around this. So the Fraser observation that kings were ritually killed when their ability to live out the king archetype began to fail. So in
mm,
all these examples we've come up with, what I'm failing to understand is so these people were killed because of their inability to live out the king archetype, or is it the perception of society that, okay, you've outlived or you cannot fulfill the king archetype?
So, one example that's coming to mind is, for all his faults and for all the wonderful things that people may ascribe to him, Pope Benedict. He's still alive. He stepped down, and someone else stepped in for him, Francis. And so we have one pope in the Catholic Church who no longer had the generative energy, no longer had, well, maybe never had any positive things to ascribe to him. And people got pissed, and people wanted something more relevant, something newer. And then in comes Francis, and he's not perfect by any stretch of the imagination, but he certainly has brought in some new energy and created some controversy. And you know, so that's kind of where my mind goes in that.
So it's like electing a new guy into office when the old guy can't do the job anymore.
Yeah, that's part of, in a Republican democracy or republic. That's certainly what happens. Yeah.
or a board of directors getting a new CEO.
Yeah.
There you go. Yeah. So we're starting to see connections in real life, how this book can affect us and has been affecting us without us perhaps knowing. Yeah, absolutely. New board of directors. Yeah, new CEO. So here's a chance to talk, and we have about 10 minutes to talk about this. So we have quite a bit of time to talk about this particular thing, service to the realm. So my question is, in what areas of your life do you demonstrate service to the realm above your own self-interest? What beliefs lay behind your interest? And how do others respond to you when you are radiating king energy? So actually, let me create a new document and let me put that up on a shared screen. Well, actually, I'll just share this with you. So you can see it, and I highlighted it so you can see it a little better. There you go. In what areas of your life do you demonstrate service to the realm above your own self-interest? What beliefs lay behind your perspective? How do others respond to you when you are radiating king energy? Any man may begin.
Speaking for myself,
Mm-hmm.
I am, not active like at a very public level. Like I'm not involved in, political service or anything like that. But one thing I think can be accurately described in me is that I'm a foul weather friend.
Oh.
And people turn to me. So
Mm-hmm.
people who I know, sometimes I don't hear from them ever, except when they're down. That's when one time I hear from them. And how I radiate king energy is through, I lay down the concept of just self-forgiveness, the forgiveness of others and forgiveness of self.
Mm-hmm.
That they're not wrong or sinful, but mistaken in their interpretation, and that at the heart of it all, they're just operating under a mistaken impression, or a mistaken interpretation of what's happening,
Mm-hmm.
and that or that whatever is happening is open to interpretation. That in itself is very it's helpful to my friends, and that they have another way of looking at this. They can choose again, and
Nice.
And the response is one of oneness. That I'm not, that the words "just like me" come up. They're not unique in their pain, and that they're part of that they're a work of art in process to constantly, that this is a classroom we're in. We're in a classroom situation.
Mm-hmm.
That's how I do it.
Yeah, it sounds kind of like a mixture of blessing energy of the king and also a little magician in there too, which we'll get to in a couple weeks.
Mm.
You're not only a king, but you're a magician, it sounds like, in that process. One other person would you like to share, and then we'll ask another question.
I'll share.
Okay.
I feel like I actually don't serve the realm, and that what you said at the very beginning of the call, where you said like the abdicating king versus the, like if you're so afraid of becoming a tyrant king that you abdicate. I thought that might have been how I have approached the past couple of years in my life, like, and abdicating my responsibilities. And although we don't live in like a kingdom and I'm not the king, but for me it would just be like using my talents and my passions to help others, that I've sort of given up, and I'm recognizing that.
Cool. Awesome. And I do the same as well. Though I'm studying this stuff and though I'm throwing a lot of energy into this, doesn't make me perfect. And I've confused being a lover, having lover energy, for having abdicating king, shadow king energy. So I can identify that, and I struggle with that as well. Bill, did you have something too?
Yeah, this is all kind of coming together for me, which is really helpful. To make a long story short, I have been a hero for lots of years, and then lost a job, which kind of devastated me and put my life in kind of shambles. It's like a jigsaw puzzle that wasn't put together anymore. It was just shattered. And some of the pieces that are coming together here, I was working with an I group and suddenly realized that some of the younger men particularly were looking to me for leadership, and all of a sudden it struck me that there's this hunger for king energy that somehow kind of flows out from me. And so that's one reason why I'm here, is to kind of explore that a little bit more deeply.
Yeah. Very good.
This is Ted. I just want to offer a brief piece, is that this is about service to the realm. So doing things for others is one possible aspect of that. That there are, following your king often looks and says, that man is a farmer, and sees the calling in those men and directs them in from a tribal aspect of this, or that man is a warrior, or that man is a weapons maker, those kinds of things. And that's how you serve. So even though you may be serving yourself in the joy of making a weapon or being a warrior or whatever, it still fits within the tribal framework. It still is about service. It's about being something bigger. And I invite you to look at your mission and see how you're working that, and how that is that serving in the world. What you're called to do is serving in the world.
Absolutely. Yeah, the king certainly has an administrative function as well, and that could be identifying gifts in other people and pairing them with opportunities for them. Thank you, Ted. And hi, by the way, I didn't see you on here. It's very good. And and I would ask rhetorically, just kind of in a reflective kind of way, what areas of your life do you wish you could step into a more mature king energy? And what is preventing you from getting there? Perhaps you are, like me, abdicating some of your king energy, or perhaps you're not. So
Daniel?
Yeah.
I shared the other night I was at one of my I groups, and it's the first time I decided that I would be a king starting next week. And I put my hand up and said, and I did it just kind of like just to step out there, not knowing how to do it, or I just said, I basically raised my hand and said I would do it. And the person who was king said, just so you know, I see this emerging warrior, I see king energy coming out of you, which I of course don't see. And it was really felt good to hear. But then I got scared. Oh my God, if I'm showing that, and then I'm going to need to step up at another level. And boy, did I get spooked. So it was great to hear it, but boy, did I get spooked when he said it. So I'll be king in our I group next Wednesday for the first time, which should be very interesting.
Awesome. Well, good for you, and good for you for stepping up in doing that. And some king saw king energy in you and affirmed that and enabled your participation in your I group. So that's wonderful. Let me read this, the last paragraph beginning on page 61, and we'll dissect it briefly and then move on to Shadow King, because I think that's where a lot of the juice is. But I'll read this and think of some key words, or try to listen for some key words about king. The king archetype in its fullness possesses the qualities of order, of reasonable and rational patterning, of integration and integrity in the masculine psyche. It stabilizes chaotic emotion and out-of-control behaviors. It gives stability and centeredness. It brings calm. And in its fertilizing and centeredness, it mediates vitality, life force, and joy. It brings maintenance and balance, defends our own sense of inner order, our own integrity of being and of purpose, our own central calmness about who we are, and our essential unassailability and uncertainty in our masculine identity, or certainty, in our masculine identity. It looks upon the world with a firm but kindly eye. It sees others in all their weakness and in all their talent and worth. It honors them and promotes them. It guides them and nurtures them toward their own fullness of being. It is not envious because it is secure as the king in its own worth. It rewards and encourages creativity in us and in others. So what jumps out to you there? And we can spend a couple minutes on this.
Daniel,
Yeah.
I don't want this to derail, and if it's not germane, let's set it in the parking lot. But I keep hearing references to the masculine. And, you know, the king could also be considered sovereign.
Yeah.
In, you know, places like Hawaii, they have a matriarchy. And I keep, a part of my mind keeps going to, well, how is that unique to masculine? Or, you know, what part of that wouldn't also apply to feminine sovereign? So I just keep getting distracted by that. And one answer that came to me is when this was written, and there was the men's movement was hot. It was really popular. And so there are a lot of men finally willing to go and look at archetypes and psychology and boy to manhood sort of things. So that's what's on my mind. Thank you, Dan.
Oh, no, very germane. Thank you for sharing. And yes, in a way, I shouldn't say in a way. Yes, it's sexist in that it's focusing on men, and that was its purpose. In other interpreters of Jung, female interpreters of Jung particularly, have talked about the queen having both, you know, since we're talking about the king, let's just look at the queen. Same shadow things, tyrant and weakling. And, you know, as it moves forward, you know, mother, wise woman, and lover, very similar to warrior, magician, lover. So I just wanted to share that with you. But, you know, also this in itself is sexist because it's using the male archetypes as the taxonomy that the females need to use. And wouldn't it be great if females had their own sets of archetypes independent of what other categories males have? So it's both inclusive and sexist. I agree with you.
I think the introduction addresses that well by saying that the two ways that modern man is not in touch with his masculine is A, because of the lack of initiation, but also the absence of awareness of the oppressiveness of the patriarchy. The patriarchy, and
Yes.
like, you know, the people don't, you know, men have so much to benefit from the feminist movement because the feminists are rebelling against the patriarchy. And if more men realize that they are also victims of the patriarchy,
Yeah,
they would be more free to understand the dynamics and not feel threatened, you know?
yeah.
So,
And as Carl Jung would add, that we have both anima and animus.
yeah.
Both males and females have male and female energies within themselves.
Thank you, David, for bringing that up.
So out of touch with that. Yeah. No, very good. Thank you, David Bird, and thank you, Stavros, for your contributions there. So anyone, does anything jump out at anyone in that paragraph describing the king? Because that's...
The word balance.
Yeah, anything else?
Calm. The word
Yeah.
calm.
Yeah. Maria Montessori described the ideal minister as a calm, non-anxious presence. And I interpret that as exhibiting king energy also. But of course, she's talking about a Roman Catholic priest being Catholic herself, not necessarily ideal for an imam or a rabbi or Protestant minister.
I don't know if this is true, but I feel like when the yin and yang are described as like feminine and masculine, the main distinction I've heard is that the masculine archetype is a giver and the feminine is a receiver. But the truth is, I don't know if that's true. I don't know if it applies today. I don't know if that was like the truth for people thousands of years ago, or that was just the truth they wanted to believe. So this is all just like fraught with, I don't know, but that's what I've heard, is that the masculine in theory is a doer and the feminine is a receiver.
Yeah.
But truthfully, I don't actually believe that. I just wanted to share that to add to the conversation.
No, that's great. And realizing that I'm an interpreter of Moore is an interpreter of Jung, and Jung is an interpreter of Freud. So everything goes down to the anatomical contributions and of male and female. And so Freud talked about the receptiveness of females and the penetrating of males. And so that's where I believe this comes from, this phenomenon you're talking about. So
if I could
yeah,
just
it is a little dated. It is not, and so maybe I, as an interpreter, can come up with something that's less anatomically centered.
The truth is, I actually think it's the opposite. That, like you said, when the boy dies, he's no longer the hero, the doer, the immature masculine. He actually learns how to receive help, ask for help, look to quote unquote the gods for help. So maybe the mature masculine is the receiver, and the mature feminine, the queen, the mother, the other ones, maybe maybe everyone's a receiver. I don't know. I feel like it's so, like, a lot of this stuff is so based in theory that I've stopped trying to talk about stuff that I don't know firsthand.
Yeah. And you're
especially
approaching,
when it comes to gender or anything like that.
Yeah, and you're approaching the challenges of Derrida in terms of language and Foucault in terms of post-structuralism, and how all of this can kind of be blown apart by, like, why are we only using language to describe this, fill in the blank, or why are we, so focused on these categories and taxonomies that we are blind to other aspects that could. So no, you're absolutely right, and you point to the limitations of this, and this is just one way of looking at the world, and at so don't look at this as the end all be all. Look at this as a way of accessing your primordial energies.
What I heard with that paragraph is the king, in terms of giving and receiving, they're the same, because you can't give what you don't have, and by giving, you're affirming what you have.
Yes.
So the king is affirming the spirit of the king, like the essence of the king is there, no matter what personality exhibits it. So they're both in unison. They're giving and receiving. That the receiver is as much of a part of is part of the circuit. To give and have no one receive it is breaking the circuit.
Right.
And so giving and receiving are one and the same, affirming one essence.
That's right. Yeah. It's a what do you call it? A paradox. The giving and receiving being one and the same. Absolutely. Yeah. And
not a contradiction, but a paradox in terminology. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think maybe we could turn to lesbian theorist Lucy Irigaray, who talks about openness to openness as kind of a paradigm to use. So, when our lips speak together, she's talking about two vaginas being pressed together, and this openness to openness being giving and receiving at the same time. And I think maybe that's about, rather than a penetrative penis into vagina, maybe this openness to openness may be a better way to look at it. So we can thank feminism for changing perhaps our views. I also want to be conscious. We are over our time limit by 2 minutes. I want to be respectful of everyone's time. So at this time, I think we've already touched on the Shadow King, the weakling, and the Tyrant King. Tyrant exploits and abuses others. The weakling abdicates responsibility and that sort of thing. And just by way of mentioning, the weakling can become a little tyrant. In fact, Moore calls him a little Hitler if he snaps. So, we've heard of like someone going postal on someone, the same phenomenon. So weaklings can appear to be tyrants or warriors if we aren't careful to look at the other traits. So in closing, as you leave this workshop today, reflect on your ability to lead and other leaders' ability or inability to lead. And I don't mean leader like MKP leader track or whatever. I mean, your own ability to serve the realm, either by showing people their gifts or by creating order and creating calm, creating peace, creating that kind of world, or their inability, whether it's your boss, your rabbi, your whatever, And so the path you're taking, I believe, will surely get you into a place where you are, by just opening your mind to these concepts, this way of thinking, we're able to add to our knowledge and add to our own freedom. So I invite you to check out one by one. I'll call on you. Share your name, your animal name if you have one, your primary feeling now, and a word or phrase, something that you've taken from the workshop today. So I'll call on you. David Bird, would you check out, please?
Oh, no, I did not want to go first.
Don't advocate,
David Bird, Bear, and I get to take this through a filter of having been a full leader for Training Adventures for 15 years. So during those four days, I get to kind of wear the mantle. We've never used an actual crown, but we've sure done a lot to enroll and think about, am I being a good king or a bad king, and to, am I serving the goals of what we're all trying to get together here? What I took away most was your openness to step outside kind of a railroad of this was what we were going to do in 90 minutes and look at that, okay, how does masculine keep getting pulled into talking about the king? So I'm grateful.
Oh, thank you. Mike Kensing.
Mike Kensing, a fierce, kind dear. Feeling very grateful to you, Daniel, for this session. It's very helpful and insightful. More than anything, more I realize there's something really in me that's really drawn to this. And I feel there's a greater consciousness I have about this journey I'm on this male archetype, and about the boy going to man. It's just it's making me really look more consciously at kind of where I'm at without trying to judge or shame myself about where I am, that it's okay, So with that, I'm out.
Jacob?
Jacob, checking out with joy. I really enjoyed this session. I never really wanted to read the book before, even though it was recommended to me numerous times, because I thought, it's going to be too heady. And so I'll just have the experience of the NWTA and the I groups. But now I'm sort of inspired to pick it up and go inside and reflect. and it's open to a new possibilities at that amount.
Awesome. Bill Cheney?
Bill Cheney, Golden Eagle, feeling encouraged. And the thing I want to take away from is that there seems to be purpose in the destruction of my hero, as I talked about earlier. And I'm looking forward to growing more and participating more with the King energy. And with that, I'm out.
Cool. Stavros?
Stavros Panopoulos, Noble Radiant Owl, and I'm feeling excited. And my takeaway from this is that I think my perception is been amplified and enhanced in interpreting my world around me in a very positive way. And with that, I'm out.
Cool. Scott Ryder?
Scott Ryder, Emperor Penguin, feeling joy and appreciation. And my takeaway, the one word takeaway is balance.
Cool. Any feeling?
Joy.
Oh, joy. I'm sorry.
And
Cool.
I'm out.
Dave Messman?
Dave Messman, Unapologetic Gorilla. Checking out with reflection, I think what MKP means as I move from boy to man internally, I'm mostly focusing on warrior energy. That's where I was missing a lot of boundary setting. But the King energy parts, I hadn't concentrated on those as much. And I think it helps me more to think about the calm leadership style, and I want to embrace that energy more. With that, I'm out.
Awesome.
Oh,
Mike spelled backwards.
Mike Bain, Wise Old Roaring Lion. Feeling some joy, feeling a little sadness because I came on late and I feel that I missed a lot. Looking at being the king who's an unemotionalist reactor. And being the king from a place of love. And blending in the magician. Instead of just being the tyrant warrior.
Yeah.
So I'm in with that.
Oh. Ted Freeman.
Ted Friedman, True Hawk out of the gray. I'm checking out joy and fear. And Daniel, blessings to you. This was, it's just, just wonderful to hear your brilliance and all you men. But Daniel, you put something together. Here's the vision already coming to life. And so the gift I got out of this regarding the king, what maybe wasn't a word that I heard, but it was a word that came to me, which is the word of grace. And it has a little bit of history in my life of late, the past several years. And I won't share that here, but thank you for that reminder. I'm out.
Cool. And Daniel Rodriguez Schlorff, Sage, feeling joy and relief and gratitude for all you men. And I am checking out with one thing I got from the workshop. I got some new perspective today. I really did, just by rereading and hearing you men reread. So yeah, that was helpful for me, and I'm out. So thanks everyone. Thanks everyone for coming.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Hopefully
I
see you
just
next
add
week.
something? Daniel,
Yeah.
there is a staff meeting in the city next Saturday
Yeah.
in the afternoon.